The farewells to Ted Knight were few. There was more recollection, fond memories of the man who immortalized Ted Baxter, anchorman like no other.
When people think of Ted Knight, they often picture the pompous and hilarious news anchor Ted Baxter from The Mary Tyler Moore Show. He was loud, arrogant, and so full of himself that it was impossible not to laugh. But what millions of fans never realized was that behind that famous smile and booming voice was a man who carried years of pain, insecurity, and personal battles. Ted Knight made America laugh at a character who was a reflection of everything he feared about himself. While audiences adored the overconfident anchor, Ted quietly worried that people would never see the real him, a thoughtful, sensitive man who had fought his way up from poverty, prejudice, and heartbreak. The irony was cruel. America had fallen in love with the bully, while the gentle soul behind the mask was slowly breaking inside. This story is not just about a talented comedian, but about the heavy price of fame and the emotional scars it can leave behind. Ted Knight was born on December 7, 1923, in a tiny house in Terryville, Connecticut. His birth name was Tadeusz Władysław Konopka, a name that instantly marked him as different in an America that was still suspicious of immigrants. His parents, Charles and Sophia, had come from Poland in search of a better life, but instead found hardship. The family lived in a small two-family home with 9 people crammed under one roof. Money was always short, and by the time Ted was just 10 years old, the Great Depression had hit hard. To help his family survive, he worked long hours delivering newspapers at dawn and shining shoes late into the evening. Even as a child, he carried the weight of responsibility on his small shoulders. Yet, despite the endless work and the teasing he faced for his Polish roots, Ted found something magical in performing. At church and school, he discovered his gift for acting, voice mimicry, and comedy. For a brief moment on stage, he could be anyone, and the laughter from the audience made him feel accepted. But the cruelty of classmates who mocked his accent and mispronounced his name reminded him that the world outside the stage wasn't as kind. By the age of 16, Ted made a life-changing decision. He changed his name from Tadeusz Konopka to Ted Knight. It wasn't just a name change, it was a declaration of survival. In an era when foreign names were often ridiculed, Ted wanted to sound American enough to be accepted. The name Knight symbolized strength and courage, qualities he wanted people to see in him. Around that same time, the world was entering World War II, and Ted's path took another unexpected turn. He joined the U.S. Army and served bravely in Europe as part of the 296th Combat Engineer Battalion. His unit worked under fire, building roads and bridges through dangerous battlefields, including Normandy and the Battle of the Bulge. Ted faced explosions, freezing weather, and constant fear, yet he never gave up. During the rare quiet moments, he entertained fellow soldiers with a homemade ventriloquist dummy named Little Jeff. He made them laugh to forget the horrors around them. Those wartime performances proved that Ted's true gift wasn't just humor. It was the ability to heal others through laughter, even when he himself was hurting. When the war ended, Ted used the GI Bill to study acting at the Randall School of Dramatic Arts in Hartford. He was determined to build a better life for himself and his future family, but the road to fame was far from easy. He worked at radio stations, took small voiceover jobs, and acted in tiny theater productions that barely paid enough to cover rent. In 1948, he married Dorothy Smith, the woman who would become his greatest supporter through every hardship. Together they had 3 children, Ted Jr., Elise, and Eric, and moved from city to city chasing opportunities. By the 1950s, Ted was doing local television in Albany and Providence, hosting kids' shows and performing with puppets just to make ends meet. Some weeks he made only $75, but Dorothy's faith in him never wavered. Hollywood, however, wasn't welcoming. Casting directors told him his face was too ethnic and that he would never be a leading man. For nearly 20 years, Ted played small parts in shows like Gunsmoke, The Twilight Zone, and Combat. Sometimes he wasn't even credited. Each rejection chipped away at his confidence, but he refused to give up. The man who once built bridges in war was now building one toward his dream, one audition at a time. In 1970, at the age of 47, Ted Knight's life changed forever. He was cast as Ted Baxter on The Mary Tyler Moore Show. The character was a self-absorbed, clueless news anchor who took himself far too seriously, and Ted played him perfectly. Audiences instantly fell in love with the ridiculousness of Ted Baxter. They laughed at his arrogance, his vanity, and his mistakes. The show became a cultural phenomenon, and Ted Knight became a household name. But the fame came with a dark side. As the show grew in popularity, Ted began to feel trapped by the very character that made him famous. People on the street called him Ted Baxter, and critics joked that he wasn't even acting, that he was just playing himself. Those comments cut deep. He feared that everyone saw him as stupid, just like his TV character. Once, during filming in 1974, he broke down in tears in front of the show's producer saying, "Everyone thinks I'm an idiot." It was the most painful moment of his career. The man who had fought to prove himself intelligent and capable now found the world laughing at his fake stupidity. Fame had given him everything and taken away his peace. Behind the camera, Ted struggled to separate himself from his character. He became sensitive about jokes that touched on his Polish background or his intelligence. The show's writers even stopped writing Polish humor because they saw how deeply it affected him. His co-stars respected his talent, but also admitted that he could be difficult to work with. Ted wasn't angry without reason. He was fighting a war inside his own mind. To him, every joke about Ted Baxter felt like a personal insult. He wanted to be respected as a serious actor, not just a punchline. Even so, he continued to give his best performance, winning 2 Emmy Awards and earning multiple nominations. His transformation of a simple comic character into a layered, emotional figure remains one of television's most impressive feats. Yet even as his career soared, Ted's personal life was becoming more complicated. The stress, the fear of being typecast, and the feeling of living behind a mask took a toll on his mental health. By the end of the Mary Tyler Moore Show in 1977, Ted had reached the height of success and the edge of exhaustion. Around the same time, Ted received devastating news. He was diagnosed with colon cancer, but he decided to keep it private. Not even his co-stars knew what he was going through. For years, he worked through treatments, chemotherapy, and pain, all while maintaining his trademark humor on screen. When Too Close for Comfort premiered in 1980, it gave Ted a new chance to redefine himself. He played Henry Rush, a protective father who was funny, clever, and occasionally cranky, a role much closer to the real Ted Knight. The show was a success, and fans loved seeing him back in a new light. He even got to show off his ventriloquist skills through a puppet called Cosmic Cow, reminding the world that he had more to offer than Ted Baxter. But behind the smiles, the disease was spreading. His weight dropped, his strength faded, yet he refused to stop working. He would film all day, then collapse in pain at night. His determination amazed everyone around him. For Ted, continuing to act wasn't about fame anymore. It was about proving to himself that he still had control over his life. By 1985, Ted's condition had worsened. The cancer had spread to his bladder and intestines, and doctors warned him that he didn't have much time left. Still, he showed up to the studio every morning, makeup covering his pale skin, oxygen tank nearby, pushing through the pain with quiet courage. In July 1986, after one last surgery that lasted nearly 8 hours, Ted knew his time was almost over. He spent his final days at home surrounded by his wife, Dorothy, and their children. On August 26, 1986, Ted Knight passed away at the age of 62. The news shocked fans and friends alike. At his funeral, even his former co-stars, who had seen his temper and struggles, spoke through tears about his kindness and hidden generosity. Actor Adam West revealed that Ted had secretly donated tens of thousands of dollars to children battling cancer, a side of him that few ever knew. It was a reminder that the man the world thought was arrogant and loud was in truth humble and full of heart. His death left a silence that even laughter couldn't fill. After his death, Ted Knight's influence continued to echo through Hollywood. 2 years later, his voice appeared in Caddyshack 2, recreated from old recordings, a haunting tribute to his unique sound. Comedian Will Ferrell later admitted that his famous Anchorman character, Ron Burgundy, was inspired by Ted Baxter. Even the dog in the movie was named Baxter, a playful nod to Ted's legacy. In 1985, Ted had received a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame just a year before his passing. That star stood as a symbol of everything he had fought for: recognition, respect, and remembrance. But the real story of Ted Knight wasn't just about television success or fame. It was about a man who faced rejection, insecurity, and illness with. After Ted Knight's passing, his family faced an emptiness that no words could fill. Dorothy, his wife of almost 4 decades, often said that the hardest part was not the silence, it was the laughter that was gone. For years, their home had been full of jokes, silly impressions, and playful teasing. Ted loved to make his kids laugh, and even during the darkest times of his illness, he tried to keep the mood light. When he died, the laughter stopped, and the family had to learn how to live without the heart of their household. Dorothy, ever graceful and strong, decided that her husband's memory shouldn't fade into sadness. She worked quietly to keep his name alive by supporting the arts, funding scholarships for young actors, and speaking at charity events in his honor. Ted Jr., Elise, and Eric often spoke publicly about how humble their father truly was. Not the loud character everyone saw on TV, but a gentleman who cried during old movies and built birdhouses in his garage. They said that behind his comic brilliance was a deep kindness that no camera could ever capture. It was this side of Ted Knight, the family man, the friend, the humble dreamer, that they wanted the world to remember. In the years after Ted Knight's death, Hollywood began to see him differently. At first, most people remembered him only as Ted Baxter, the lovable fool. But as time passed, critics and younger actors began to look closer at his work. They realized that what he had done was not simple comedy, it was art. Playing an egotistical, clueless character in a way that made audiences laugh without hating him was no easy task. Ted managed to make Ted Baxter both annoying and lovable at the same time. That required intelligence, precision, and incredible timing. Acting schools began using his performances as lessons in comedic rhythm and delivery. Directors and writers spoke about how Ted's ability to make a character larger than life, yet strangely believable, was a rare gift. In interviews from the early 2000s, stars like Steve Carell and Jason Sudeikis mentioned Ted Knight as an inspiration. Carell even said that Michael Scott from The Office shared the same DNA as Ted Baxter, a man so desperate to be respected that his cluelessness became both funny and tragic. This new wave of recognition turned Ted Knight from just a sitcom star into one of the great comic actors of television history. But Ted Knight's story wasn't just about television, it was about transformation. He had started as a poor immigrant son, fought in one of history's bloodiest wars, and built a career through sheer perseverance. His journey showed what it truly meant to be self-made in America. In interviews near the end of his life, he spoke about how much the entertainment industry had changed since his early days. He warned young actors that fame was a double-edged sword. It could lift you high, but it could also cut you deeply. Ted believed that laughter was sacred. If you can make people forget their troubles even for a minute, he once said, then you've done something good with your life. Those words became his legacy. After his death, several organizations created awards in his honor, celebrating comedic excellence and humanitarian work. Schools and community theaters named their acting stages after him. In his hometown of Terryville, Connecticut, a bronze plaque stands near the place where he grew up, reminding visitors that greatness can rise from even the humblest beginnings. Each of these tributes tells the same story. Ted Knight was not just a funny man, he was a man who used humor as a way to heal the world. For decades, fans wondered why Ted had hidden so much of his personal pain from the public. Some said it was because he came from a generation that didn't talk about emotions. Others believed it was because he never wanted to seem weak. But those closest to him understood the truth. Ted didn't want sympathy. He wanted people to see his work, not his wounds. Yet in private, he often battled deep insecurity. He feared being forgotten, feared that people only laughed at him, not with him. His co-stars remembered that he would often sit quietly after a show, replaying scenes in his mind, worrying that he hadn't been funny enough. That perfectionism came from